Thank you, Rory. It is an absolute pleasure to be here this evening on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country. And Rory, I know you did a wonderful acknowledgement just before, but I'm going to do one too. I think tonight's all about sharing knowledge, and I would like to thank the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung traditional custodians for doing just that with us so that we can better our care and understanding of country and better our understanding of ourselves and our history with Australia. I'd also like to extend this appreciation and thanks to fellow First Nations peoples in this room, and also to my mob back up in Meanjin in Brisbane, and also on Wauchope in Birpai country and Moree in Kamilaroi country. Today I'm talking about design for discussion, and I'll share with you my pathway into publishing and also talk about what we do at Architecture Media and how we curate and design discussion in the publications and all different types of events that we do. But first, you're probably wondering who the bloody hell I am, so I'm going to jump into that. I'm an associate editor at Architecture Media, a graduate of architecture, and a proud descendant of the Kamilaroi, Dunghutti and Birpai peoples. I also have Danish and English descent as well. I am Brisbane born and bred. I finished my Bachelor of Architecture and my Masters of Architecture up at the University of Queensland. And during my time there, I did take a year out to go and practice architecture and see if I even liked the business of architecture. Thank goodness I did, so I kept on doing my Masters. And then after that, I moved from a medium-sized practice into a kind of boutique-sized practice where we were doing a lot of residential works and small boutique commercial work too. And it was during that period that I started to do some reviews for the State Library of Queensland on some of the events that they were having, and I really enjoyed it, so I decided to pester them and ask if they had any more opportunities for me there. And I think that's where the connection between architecture and media and myself began, because through that, the State Library of Queensland and Architecture Media co-founded the Asia Pacific Architecture Festival, and at the time Cameron Bruin had moved up to Brisbane and asked me to co-curate that festival with him. So of course I said yes, so I wanted to do something outside of my practice work, and it was super interesting and intriguing, and that's where I met basically everyone that I work with now. I really enjoyed working with that team, and they seemed to really enjoy working with me, particularly Caitlin, who literally slid into my Instagram DMs and asked me if I wanted to work with them down in Melbourne. And I was like, oh, that's so nice, ha ha ha. And she goes, no, I'm serious. So I called her the next day and we talked about it, and I basically moved to Melbourne in the space of 2 months to start my next part of my career down here as an associate editor at Architecture Media. And since then, I've now also become curator for Design Speaks, which is part of what we do there. And also I work across a lot of the publications we have. I wanted to share this slide with you as my heritage is quite important to me and a big part of what I do. As I said, I'm a proud Aboriginal woman, but I'm also of Danish and English descent. This is my dad, Tony, here with an awesome mullet at the time. And this is my beautiful mum, Tracy. This is my grandpop, Laurie, and my grandma, Elaine. And this is my dad as a cute little baby. And up on the left here, we've got my nan, Pauline, and her sister, Auntie Lana and Auntie Anne. And that's my mum, so cute, and my mum here as well. I've been really lucky to have amazing family experience on both sides, and strong women have influenced who I am on both sides. So for me, I walk in two worlds, and I know I'm not the only First Nations person to do that. And because I've had such strong women influence who I am, it's really important to me that I embrace both sides, and I find a balance in both advocating for something that I'm really passionate about, such as First Nations voices, but also cherish all of the other things that make up who I am. And I really hope the rest of the industry sees that, and I hope that other First Nations professionals in this industry see that as well and are inspired to be themselves and do what they love as well. Hopefully you'll see some of what I do that reflected in what I do tonight. So who or what is Architecture Media? We are talking about discussion tonight, and that is what Architecture Media is all about. Architecture Media is an online and print publisher, as well as an events company with a focus on the built environment. It was founded by Ian Close back in 1987, so it's been around for about 36 years. And we are also an associate company of the Australian Institute of Architects. We do a whole bunch of things and are affiliated with the Australian Institute of Landscape Architects, the Design Institute of Australia, as well as the Planning Institute of Australia. And always the content is about educating and inspiring architects, designers, and hopefully clients and other built environment professionals. This is something we strive to do across all of our print and online publications as well as events. And some of them you might be familiar with. Architecture Australia is something we publish, Houses Magazine, Landscape Australia and Artichoke Magazine. We also offer Selector, which is our product magazine. We have Architecture AU, which is our online offering. Most of our articles end up there, but it's also a place where we pump out a lot of newsworthy stuff as well, and things that are quite timely. Design Speaks, as I've mentioned, are our in-person events. We also have the Asia Pacific Architecture Festival and a whole bunch of awards as well. Houses Awards, the Australian Interior Design Awards, AA Prize for Unbuilt Work, and AAU Social Impact Award, and the Eat, Drink, Design Awards. So editing and curating is a bunch of fun, but myself and as well as my colleagues, we take the role quite seriously. We do feel that we have a great responsibility to the industry because we basically are a resource for professionals. We hope that what we put out into the world even ripples into other industries in the built environment. And I think the role of an editor is succinctly explained by Justine Clark in a piece that she was co-written titled The Editors back in September in 2004. Editors play a key role in determining the direction of a publication, and I would probably add into the industry indirectly, but a magazine is always an outcome of more than one person. Publishers, readers, advertisers, the institute all affect the magazine, as does the wider culture in which it is embedded. And I wanted to highlight one part of this quote, which is always an outcome of more than one person, because both practice and publishing influence each other in unison. You can't have one without the other. And with this in mind, it's really, really important that as editors, we are constantly engaged with the industry, and we are researching and networking to make sure that we know what is happening in both the academic fields and also the practicing world, and even in industries that overlap with the built environment. So that's just sciences and the arts. And then why we have that responsibility is because we are then lucky enough to be in a position to consider what then needs to be shared in the interests of the architectural profession. So we do feel that great responsibility. So why is architectural discourse important? Well, mostly I think it's for a number of reasons. It's a place to share information, continue professional development. We document history through discourse. It's an opportunity to critically think about things, to self-reflect and to critique. We can question how we can better ourselves as an industry, and in relation to social, cultural, economic context and climate factors. But all of the above sort of relates to the fact that it's important because we can then develop as an industry. So tonight I hope to show a couple of different types of media that we do at Architecture Media to show you how we design for discussion. The first example that I want to go through with you is Architecture Australia. But before we jump into it, I think it's important to understand a bit of its history. Architecture Australia is the national journal of record for the Australian Institute of Architects, and that actually happened back in 1938. But the first volume, Volume 1, Number 1, started in 1904, and the publication, which is now Architecture Australia, was named the Journal of the Institute of Architects of New South Wales. So next year it's turning 120 years old. And throughout the century, it's chopped and changed its names over a couple of years, but in 1975, it landed on Architecture Australia. There's been many editors over the century. Robin Boyd was an associate editor for the magazine, but most recently there's been Justine Clark, who now runs Parlour, Cameron Brun, who is now the CEO of the Australian Institute of Architects, and currently it's Caitlin Butler, who is an established author and critic, as well as my dear friend and mentor. I wanted to share this quote with you by Philip Goad from his article, 100 Years of Discourse, because I think it still applies, even though it's 19 years old. I think it really describes about what Architecture Australia is all about. Such documentary evidence, however simple, records the significant and diverse activities of the profession, and in many respects, the profession's readiness to engage with the culture, both internal and external to itself. Architecture Australia has therefore been and continues to be an ideal medium for disseminating and constructing not just architecture, but also views and patterns of discourse that in many ways can be just as powerful as the buildings produced by the profession's members. So to follow on from Philip's quote, and I think the parts in there, we've been disseminating Australian architectural projects and sharing them by grouping them through themed issues, and we've been sharing views and patterns of discourse and research through dossiers. Dossiers are a small section of the magazine that really deep dives onto a particular topic. And as you can see, this is just over the past, since 2021 to 2023, we've done lots of themes and a bunch of dossiers, and there's plenty to say about architecture. So how do we design for discussion? How do we take all there is to say and filter it down into a publication? As I mentioned earlier, one way is through a theme. So I'm going to touch on how a theme sort of evolves in what we do here. As editors, we do a lot of research. One way a theme might come across our desk is through somebody submitting a research paper, and we can sort of see that there are a lot of projects that are happening that could actually filter in and expand on this topic that the research is talking about. An example of this is our March-April issue from last year, which was titled Designing for Dignity. The dossier in this magazine was titled Retrofit Project, Adaptive Systems for More Inclusive Housing, and it was guest edited by Mariam Goucher and Catherine Murphy, who both work at the Department of Architecture at Monash Uni. In the dossier, it asked how we can rework our existing housing stock to achieve social and spatial justice for all. So from that particular dossier, the team, myself, Caitlin and Nikki Dodwin-Wheeler, who's the managing editor of Architecture Australia, we worked together to find projects that could fit in with that theme, and also rework some articles to expand on that particular topic. Another way, through all of the research that we do, is hearing what people are talking about and what issues are relevant and really important at the time. We then realise we need to really jump on this theme. We're seeing projects that could work with this theme, but we need to work with guest editors who are experts on this theme and can help us curate this magazine together. An example of this is our July-August issue called Beyond Sustainability, and I'll go into a bit more detail with this one in just a second. Sometimes, because we get a broad spectrum of, projects and research, and we do a lot of reading and engagement and networking in our roles, we can sort of see a pattern of projects coming together and decide that they'll all neatly fit into an issue, and we can expand on particular topics that are interesting. An example of this, where we curate the themed magazine ourselves, is called The Public Living Room, which was our January-February issue of this year. And it really delved into the role of a civic building and how it's impacting the community around it. And sometimes there's no theme, and that's okay, because you don't want to do a theme for the sake of doing a theme. You want to make sure that you are still providing great content, and that's where a dossier can come into play in the magazine and let you talk about a specific topic. We tend to work about a year to 8 months in advance with our publications. And at the time, through all of the research that Caitlin, Nikki and myself had been doing, as well with everybody else that we work with at Architecture Media, conversations around regenerative design, reuse, the circular economy, and the climate emergency were really loud. And also particularly on the topic of how sustainability checklists weren't necessarily producing healthier building outcomes. So we decided that it was time to jump on this theme, and there were some projects that we knew were about to be completed that could fit in. But the question was, how much do we know, and do we need experts with this, which was yes. So cue our guest editors, which were Stephen Choi, who was the 2020 recipient of the Leadership and Sustainability Prize for the Institute of Architects. We also worked with Claire Parry, who is the Director of Sustainability at Development Victoria, and Amanda Sturgeon, who is now the CEO of Built by Nature. And as sustainability experts, we worked very closely with the guest editors to ensure that the topics discussed were relevant and future focused, and that the projects were also appropriate and fit to the theme. So some of these projects that we included were Spring Bay Mill by Gilby and Bruin Architecture. We also had Monash Woodside Building Technology and Design by Grimshaw in collaboration with Monash Uni. And ANZ Breathe, which isn't shown here in the images, but it's a smaller, more franchised version of how sustainability can be executed. So there was a variety of projects and a variety of typologies that were shown in this themed issue, and we make sure we carry that through in every single issue that we do. We spread it around the nation, we try to find a balance through that, but also in the types of scale of buildings as well. And I think this just sort of strengthens the theme in general. And like the variety in project types that we had, we wanted to have a variety of discussion types and articles. And mostly that's so that we can have different points of access for different readers. You know, some people really like to delve into an essay, but some people like to skim through and look at the images. So you want to make sure you can still provide as much information for different types of way that people like to read. For example, in this issue, we had one particular piece by Nicholas Smith, which talked about the circular economy. We then also had a roundtable discussion, which was moderated by Amanda Sturgeon about regenerative future and what will it take. And then we had a co-written piece by Liz Brogden, Naomi Steed, and Philip Oldfield, Chris Knapp and Dagmar Reinhardt about architectural education and climate change. And there were just a small handful of what we had in there. So lots of different types of variety of articles for different types of readers, but also to make sure that the structure is matching the content and that the message can come through nice and clearly. So now that I've sort of wrapped up one particular type of themed issue and how that sort of comes together, like I said, sometimes there's no themed issue, but there is a particular type of topic that you want to discuss, and it's really important to be discussed at that particular time. And dossiers are a great way to do this, and you can really deep dive into a particular theme or an issue. In our most recent issue of AA, which is the July-August issue of this year, we worked with a guest editor, Danielle Rumek, on the dossier, What Can Non-Indigenous Designers Do? In this circumstance, the way this dossier came about was Danielle contributes quite a lot to our publications, and she has a lot to say. So we invited her to do a dossier, but she didn't actually know at the time, you know, this was 8 months before this even came out, what she really wanted to do. And so in one of our Design Speaks events that we had, A Broader Landscape, Danielle was on a panel, and just before she went on stage, she got asked by the moderator, I'm going to ask you the question, what can non-Indigenous designers do? And this is such a frequent question that we hear as First Nations professionals, that she knew exactly 14 points straight off the top of her head and was ready to go with under 2 minutes, within 2 minutes. And after it all happened, she came up to Caitlin and I was like, I know exactly what I want to do the dossier on. And we were like, that sounds great, let's do this. And so the process began from there about who would we get to write about each point. So we wanted to make it very clear that it wasn't this is all First Nations authors who are in this dossier, but it wasn't just because they weren't asked to write just because they were Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. They were asked to write because they knew that exact topic and they could speak to it clearly and knew exactly what they wanted to say. Something else that was really important to all of us in this, particularly Danielle, was that these 14 points weren't about a step-by-step process. They weren't a recipe. It wasn't hierarchy. There wasn't a hierarchy. All of these points can be done or should be taken in unison. And so through the graphic design work, we wanted to make it feel like it flowed together and they were all linked together in some way. And we also wanted to make the dossier, sometimes there's a lot of information in these pieces and that's okay, but you need to be able to break it down so people can read and the flow feels quite nice. In this particular circumstance with so much words, 14 points, we shortened the length of how much people would write about, and it came across really strongly, so it was really digestible for our readers. And so at the end of the day, for this particular dossier and any dossier we kind of do, it's always, we hope to see these as resources, and particularly this one, I think we hope people refer to it as a resource with the many others that are out there. So no matter where you are on your journey of unlearning and relearning your architectural processes, you can refer to this and go, oh, actually, I'm going to try and look at, point 3, I'm going to reconcile myself and my practice just a little bit more. I'm going to work on that. Or you might be doing multiple at the same time. And I think for Danielle, and probably she kind of said, well, I hope the impact is that people stop asking me this question so much. Another way that we can really hone in on particular topics is through discussion pieces. And this happens all the time in Architecture Australia. It's a big part of the magazine. One part of the magazine that we're really proud of is the Indigenising Practice series. Sarah Lynn Rees and Caitlin started talking about this, I think, maybe back in 2019. And it was all about publishing articles that were practical in nature for architects and readers to help unlearn and relearn their processes, or just discuss First Nations themes and topics in relation to architecture. The first article was titled To Award or Not to Award by Sarah Lynn Rees, and it sort of talked about how do we identify Indigenous architecture, how do we measure that, is it okay to measure that, shouldn't it just be something that happens all the time? So it was a really great way to kick off the series, and it's just ongoing, and it's been absolutely excellent to have this many voices and this many topics to just be included in Architecture Australia. Something that I'm really stoked about is that I think when we talk about cultural loading, people always go to the same person that they know. And what we hope with this series is that people see that there's plenty of First Nations built environment professionals out there that you can work with. It's just about finding what you need them for. Is it their expertise? So it's an absolute privilege to have all of these voices in the publication, but our inclusion of voices and different perspectives in design doesn't actually end in Architecture Australia. We make sure we implement that through everything we do, including our Design Speaks series, and that's because it just should be that way. So speaking about Design Speaks, this is our in-person event series. AA, Architecture Australia and Design Speaks are intrinsically linked. Sometimes through all of the research that we do for AA, we might see a theme that will work really well in an in-person event. We definitely get a lot of speaker ideas from our work that we do in Architecture Australia. And sometimes it goes both ways. So we might have an excellent speaker at the Design Speaks event that we want to write for us in the publication. Something that I really enjoy about the work being a curator for Design Speaks is that we get to work with leading practitioners. As editors and curators, we have a bird's eye view. We have a really broad spectrum of all the different topics and discourse that's happening about architecture. So it's great to work with these guest editors or guest curators because they can help us hone in on a particular topic or theme. And then we also see the content as curated by practitioners for practitioners. So then we know then it keeps the content relevant, interesting and educational, which is really important because these events are actually tied back to CPD and professional development. So yes, we work very closely with these curators and we help them refine the topics and find speakers, both national and international, who will then bring ideas and projects to the Australian architectural audience. Something that I also really like, and I know through feedback from our attendees, is that you never really know what the event's going to be like. They're all quite different to each other, and I think that is because each curator brings their own personality and thoughts with them, obviously, to the task at hand. A really great comparison is in 2022, myself and Caitlin invited Rachel Nolan from Kennedy Nolan and Karen Alcott from MA Architects to guest curate a symposium that had a residential theme. And it was interesting because we had just come out of lockdown and they wanted to add, a personal layer, a personal sort of touch to what the speakers were going to present. So what they did is they asked each individual speaker to present a sketch at the start of their talk that was a memory for them. So it could have been their family home or their particular favourite architectural building, and sketch out, what it felt like and what their memory of that place was, and then how that influenced their design thinking. And what was really beautiful was that you can see all of the different personalities coming through on that, and then it just made the feeling in the room, everyone sort of felt like a little family, really, which was really lovely. In comparison, our next symposium that we have coming up in September is guest curated by Amy Muir and of Muir Architecture and Rachel Neeson of Neeson McNeil. We wanted to have a bit of a public focus or a public architecture focus in this particular type of symposium. And they came to us with the theme idea of acts of generosity. So we're exploring the expanding boundaries of civic design and the sort of role that civic design has. And through conversations that we had through multiple meetings, it sort of revealed multiple sub-themes, which then split up the speakers into pairings. So now these pairings will speak to a particular sub-theme through their own projects. So you can already see that there's a slight difference and a bit more of a bit more formal feel to this particular symposium, but I think it will still have quite a significant impact in the influence and I guess inspiration, hopefully, to the audience. And this is just sort of noting on the different sort of characteristics between each symposium. It's about, the structure of the day that Caitlin and I work through with the guest curators is really important because we're trying to make sure that the structure of the day actually fits for the content so that it doesn't feel too crammed or rushed. It sort of really heroes the message that's coming through this theme. But we have a lot of familiar faces that come to our events, which is really lovely. So we're starting to, really feed into the social aspect of architecture as well. It's great for us because we get to network on the day. This is a couple of snapshots from our Brisbane offering that we had actually in the middle of this year for the Asia Pacific Architecture Festival. And I'm a co-curator for that festival, and Design Speaks offers a number of events for this festival as well. And now I'll sort of talk to you about another sort of scale up in curation. So rather than sort of figuring out which speakers might suit a different theme, we're sort of talking about now how events can tie back to a bigger theme and have a bigger impact, I guess, on community. So a bit of history with the Asia Pacific Architecture Festival. It was founded by Architecture Media and the State Library of Queensland, I think back in 2016. So I believe this year, if I'm doing my maths correctly, it is its 8th year. I co-curated it with Cameron Bruin starting in 2019. And over the course of the years, it's had a variety of different themes. So we've had water as a theme, linking into the Queensland Art Gallery of Modern Arts theme that they had, an exhibition that they had on at the time. We've also had How New Is Now in response to all of the COVID that was happening at the time, thinking, are we actually thinking about new things in architecture and design, or are we just repeating history? We've also had Cooperate Co-Design exist. But for 2023, we decided to sort of pull back to the original core pillars of the festival, which are culture, sustainability and economy, and really hone into the key message, which was why design matters. Each year we seek and also receive a number of events to want to participate in this festival. And I guess as the role of a curator is figuring out and filtering through these submissions to make sure they fit to the theme and have and speak to the pillars of the festival, and also have some sort of architectural element or design element as well that is discussed at the event. We do have veterans of the festival, so some people come well in advance, they prepare a year in advance and are ready to go. But sometimes we have newbies, which is exciting, and they just need a little bit of help of tailoring the content to fit back into the pillars or the theme. Sometimes they come and they've bitten off a little bit more than they can chew. So it's about not crushing their dreams, but just figuring out a way of how they might be able to achieve the event or prepare them for next year. And they always tend to come back, which is really great. We are really generous with the events that we accept as well. You know, the more the merrier. And really another role of the curator is making sure that there aren't too many overlapping events, because let's be honest, we all suffer from FOMO and we want to go to as many things as we can. And similar to AA, where we have a variety of articles, we have a variety of different types of events in the festival. And this is so that there's something for everyone. So we like to make sure we have something for the design educated, whether that's something to do with the Design Speak series with AA Roundtable, or we have an event partner such as Blacklash putting on a discussion about amplifying First Nations voices. But we also then have things for families or people who are just interested in creativity or architecture itself. So there's other things like workshops where you can go build your own breeze block, or this particular workshop here, City Sun Prints, was about going out on the day and sketching the shadows of the sun. And I think this variety has a really important role to play, and this is why I think a festival can be a really great offering, because it's an opportunity for the general population to engage with design, but also get them to understand the importance of design thinking in their cities, and perhaps get them to understand the value of architects as well. For me personally, the Asia Pacific Architecture Festival, I think, we often look to Europe and America for precedents and theories, but really our closest neighbours have a lot of commonalities with us to do with climate change, economic history, and just histories in general. And I think there's a lot of great things being developed and researched over there, so why not share and why not look to them? And personally, I think they're ahead of us in the terms of engagement and it just being second nature. The number of times we've had speakers come over and they just talk about it like it's all part of their process is brilliant and really inspiring. This year we had Patrada in playing from Sheer Maker in Thailand, and she really talked about the material mapping research that she did and local construction processes that she did. And it raised awareness of the limitations of the available resources. But the really great thing was that she was building and upskilling people in the community, and then that brought economic value back into their community, which was really great to hear. We also had Go Yuhan she's a director at Salad Dressing in Singapore, and they were quite interesting because they had a bit of a tech side to it, but they questioned whether skyscrapers could leave a good physical legacy. And they were also sharing how they had this idea of a square metre forest that communities could sort of implement in their backyard or on their street and increase biodiversity in their community there. We also had Rakura Ture, who's a principal at Mock Mackenzie in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and she unpacked the word Maori and its connection to the land through the discussion of projects that illustrate why connection to place was so important, and also shared her experience of community engagement. So, I think we can learn a lot from our neighbours, and I think that's why this festival has achieved quite a buzz up in Brisbane. Plus, as a curator, it's a fantastic way to make international friends. And so through Architecture Australia Design Speaks and the Asia Pacific Architecture Festival, I think, it sort of shows how engaged we have to be as editors and curators, and how heavily involved we still are in the architectural profession. People always ask me if I miss practicing architecture. I think I get that every time I tell people my journey. And I always have a diplomatic answer. I guess I say, "Oh, never say never." But honestly, my passion for architecture is really fed in the job that I do here. And I think that's through all the research I get to do, but I get a real kick out of all of the conversations through the people that I get to meet daily. It's really fascinating and really inspiring. Yes, sometimes I'm up at 11 p.m. to talk to somebody in Europe somewhere, but I don't care, because I always leave feeling really inspired and happy and excited to get them to come to Australia. So with all of this conversation and discourse that's happening, and like I've been sort of reiterating, as editors and curators, we get a bird's eye view of what's happening in the architectural profession and what we're hearing. So we do kind of get to see a bit of a trajectory of where we think the architectural profession's going. And I think in my point of view, I'm seeing, I believe we're seeing a lot of unlearning and a lot of relearning of architectural processes. And that's to do with, considering how much material we need to use, how much reuse we can implement into the design, and also just in sense of the process, how we are first engaging with First Nations communities and country in general. I also think there's a real expansion in the role of an architect. We're seeing a lot of people go into policy making and frameworks, or working in the government. I'm seeing a lot of friends going to curation, or even into art. One of my best friends is now an artist as well, and just has a really great sense of perspective through all the architectural drawings she's done. And then in the sense of publishing and media, I think, we're already seeing and already doing increasing diversity of voices, but I think we're going to see more of that, and that makes me really excited to see, different voices and perspectives in publishing and media, because ultimately, I think the people who design, critique, review and discuss the built environment should be as diverse a group as those who use it. So if you're interested in publishing and media, please let me know, and thank you.